My fiancé's family secretly replaced me as maid of honor with his sister, told me after the ceremony, then said I didn't look confident enough on stage. What happened next will shock you beyond belief. If you're listening to this story, please drop a comment below and let me know where you're tuning in from. I love connecting with people from all over the world who've experienced betrayal like this. My name is Emma, and I'm about to share something that changed my life forever. I'm 28 years old, and up until a year ago, I thought I knew what love looked like. I thought I understood loyalty. I was wrong about everything. The story you're about to listen to isn't just about a wedding. It's about discovering that the people you trust most can be planning your humiliation behind your back. It's about realizing that sometimes the person sleeping next to you every night is your biggest enemy. I still remember the exact moment my world cracked open. But let me start from the beginning, because the signs were there all along. I just refused to see them. 2 years ago, I was living what I thought was my dream life. I worked as a nurse at City General Hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts that left my feet aching and my scrubs stained with everything you can imagine. But I loved it. There's something about saving lives that makes every exhausted muscle worth it. My fiancé, Marcus, was everything I thought I wanted. Tall, charming, with this crooked smile that made me forget about the worst days at work. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months. He worked in marketing for his family's small business, a boutique store that sold handmade furniture. Nothing fancy, but it paid the bills. Or at least, it was supposed to. The thing about Marcus was that he had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room, right up until he didn't. In the beginning, I thought his family's constant need for help was just them being close-knit. His mother, Patricia, would call at least 3 times a week with some crisis or another. His sister, Sophie, was always between jobs, always needing someone to watch her 2 young daughters. "Emma, you're so good with kids," Marcus would say, those brown eyes pleading. "Just for a few hours, Sophie has that job interview." I'd cancel my plans. I'd show up with snacks and coloring books, spending my only day off chasing 2 toddlers around their messy apartment while Sophie was out doing God knows what. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You love their family too. The requests kept coming. Patricia needed someone to drive her to doctor appointments because she didn't trust taxi drivers. Marcus needed help with the store's bookkeeping because their accountant was too expensive. Sophie needed grocery money because her ex-husband was late with child support again. I said yes to everything. Every single thing. Looking back, I can see how they were training me, teaching me that my value came from what I could provide, not who I was. But back then, I thought I was building something beautiful. I thought I was earning my place in their family. The breaking point should have been when Patricia had her gallbladder surgery. I took 3 days off work, unpaid vacation days I couldn't really afford, to stay with her while she recovered. I cooked her meals, helped her to the bathroom, organized her medications, even cleaned her house from top to bottom because it would help her heal faster in a clean environment. Marcus barely visited, said he was too busy with the store. Sophie showed up once, complained about the smell of disinfectant, and left after 20 minutes. But Patricia? She lay in that hospital bed and told every nurse who walked by that I was such a blessing. She held my hand and called me her future daughter-in-law, with tears in her eyes. For 3 days, I felt like I finally belonged somewhere. The day after she came home, she was back to her usual self, cold, critical, acting like those tender moments had never happened. "Emma, you left water spots on the bathroom mirror," she said, not even looking up from her crossword puzzle. "And next time, don't use so much salt in the soup. It's bad for my blood pressure. I stood there holding a basket of her clean laundry, feeling like I'd been slapped. But I smiled and nodded, because that's what I always did. Marcus found me crying in my car outside his mother's house. "What's wrong, babe?" He slid into the passenger seat, that familiar concerned look on his face. "Your mom. I took care of her for 3 days, Marcus. I used up all my vacation time. I barely slept. And she's acting like I'm some kind of servant." He pulled me against his chest, stroking my hair. "She's just stressed from the surgery. You know how she gets when she's not feeling well. She doesn't mean anything by it." That phrase, "she doesn't mean anything by it." I heard it so many times, I could recite it in my sleep. But then, he'd kiss my forehead and tell me how lucky he was to have me, and I'd melt all over again. Because when Marcus wanted to, he could make you feel like you were the only person who mattered in the entire world. The wedding planning started 6 months before the big day. My best friend since college, Riley, was getting married to her longtime boyfriend, David. Riley and I had made a pact in our sophomore year. We'd be each other's maid of honor, no matter what. We joked about it through failed relationships and late-night study sessions. But when she got engaged, the first thing she said was, "Emma, I hope you're ready to plan the best bachelorette party of your life." I was beyond excited. Riley was the sister I never had. We'd been through everything together. My parents' messy divorce when I was 22, her mother's cancer scare, my grandfather's death, her struggle with anxiety. She was the one person in my life who knew me completely and loved me anyway. The maid of honor duties consumed my free time, but I didn't mind. I spent weekends dress shopping with Riley, evenings researching photographers and cake tastings. I organized her bridal shower, planned her bachelorette weekend in Nashville, and coordinated with the other bridesmaids about every detail from hair appointments to shoe dyes. Marcus was supportive, mostly. He'd bring me coffee while I worked on seating charts at our kitchen table, rub my shoulders when I got stressed about vendor deadlines. But there were moments when I caught him watching me with this strange expression I couldn't quite read. "You're really going all out for this wedding," he said one night, finding me up at midnight addressing invitations to Riley's extended family. "She's my best friend. This is her day." "I know. It's just, you're putting more energy into her wedding than our own." I looked up from the invitation in my hand, surprised. We hadn't even started planning our wedding yet. We talked about having it the following spring, but nothing concrete. "That's not true. Riley's wedding is in 3 months. Ours is still just an idea." Maybe that's the problem. There was something sharp in his voice that made my stomach clench. But when I tried to ask what he meant, he was already walking away, muttering something about getting some air. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened, brought me breakfast in bed, kissed my cheek, told me he was proud of how hard I was working for Riley. But that weird moment stuck with me, like a pebble in my shoe. 2 weeks before Riley's wedding, things started getting strange. I was at the bridal shop for Riley's final dress fitting when Sophie appeared, apparently by coincidence. She was browsing the bridesmaid dresses, running her fingers over the satin and tulle like she was shopping for herself. "Oh, Emma, what a surprise seeing you here." Riley was in the dressing room, so I walked over to say hello. Sophie had this smile that never quite reached her eyes, but she was Marcus's sister, so I tried. "Just here for Riley's final fitting. What about you?" "Oh, you know, window shopping. Dreaming about my own wedding someday." She picked up a champagne-colored dress and held it against herself in the mirror. "This would look beautiful on me, don't you think?" "It's gorgeous. Are you seeing someone?" Sophie's laugh was too loud, too sharp. "Not yet, but a girl can dream, right?" She hung the dress back up and turned to face me directly. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something about Riley's wedding. My chest tightened. What about it? Are you nervous about being maid of honor? It's a big responsibility. All those people watching you, making sure you don't trip walking down the aisle. Her voice was sweet, but there was something underneath it that made my skin crawl. I'm not nervous. Riley and I have been planning this for months. Right, of course. It's just that some people aren't really stage people, you know? Not everyone feels comfortable being the center of attention like that. She tilted her head, studying my face. You seem more like a behind-the-scenes type of person. Before I could respond, Riley emerged from the dressing room in her wedding dress, and I forgot all about Sophie's weird comments. Riley looked absolutely radiant, like she was glowing from the inside out. I spent the next hour gushing over how perfect everything looked, taking pictures, tearing up when the seamstress made the final adjustments. But that night, Sophie's words echoed in my head. Not everyone feels comfortable being the center of attention. What was that supposed to mean? I mentioned it to Marcus while we were watching TV. She was probably just making conversation, he said, not looking away from the screen. You know Sophie. She says random stuff sometimes. But it felt intentional, like she was trying to make me doubt myself. Marcus finally looked at me, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt? Annoyance? It was gone too quickly to tell. Emma, you're overthinking this. Sophie doesn't have some master plan to mess with your head. She's just Sophie. But I wasn't overthinking it. The comments kept coming. 3 days later, at a family dinner at Patricia's house, Sophie brought up the wedding again. Emma's going to be such a beautiful maid of honor, she announced to the table, her voice dripping with fake enthusiasm. I just hope she feels confident enough up there. It's intimidating, isn't it, Emma? Having everyone's eyes on you? Patricia looked up from her plate. What do you mean, confident enough? Oh, nothing bad. Just that some people are natural performers and others are more reserved. Emma's always been more of a supporter than a leader. Haven't you, Emma? The entire table went quiet. Marcus was cutting his chicken like it required his complete concentration. His father, Robert, cleared his throat and asked someone to pass the salt. But I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond. I think I'll be fine, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Of course you will. Sophie's smile was bright and poisonous. I'm sure Riley chose you for a reason. The way she said it made it sound like charity. Like Riley had picked me not because I was her best friend and the obvious choice, but because she felt sorry for me. After dinner, I cornered Marcus in the kitchen while he was loading the dishwasher. What is going on with your sister? What do you mean? The comments about confidence, about me not being a leader. It's like she's trying to plant seeds of doubt in everyone's head. Marcus sighed and closed the dishwasher harder than necessary. Emma, I think you're being paranoid. Sophie's just being Sophie. She doesn't have some conspiracy against you. Then why does it feel like she does? Maybe because you're stressed about the wedding and you're looking for problems where there aren't any. His words stung because part of me wondered if he was right. Was I being paranoid? Was I so insecure that I was imagining malice where there was just awkward conversation? But then I remembered the look in Sophie's eyes when she'd asked if I was nervous, the way she'd emphasized certain words, the satisfied smile when she'd called me a supporter instead of a leader. I'm not imagining this, Marcus. Okay. He turned to face me, but his expression was tired, like I was a problem he didn't want to deal with. What do you want me to do about it? I want you to have my back. I want you to tell your sister to stop making weird comments about my ability to be a good maid of honor. Fine, I'll talk to her. But he said it the way you'd agree to take out the trash, like it was a chore, not like he was defending the woman he claimed to love. The conversation with Sophie never happened. Or if it did, It didn't work because the comments continued. They were subtle, always delivered with a smile, always in front of other people, always designed to make me question myself without being obvious enough for anyone else to call her out. "Emma works so hard at the hospital," she'd say to Riley's mother at the rehearsal dinner. "I just hope she's not too tired to enjoy the wedding. Being maid of honor is exhausting. Emma's so detail-oriented," she'd tell the other bridesmaids. "Sometimes I worry she puts too much pressure on herself to be perfect. What if something goes wrong?" Each comment was like a small needle prick. Individually, they were nothing. Together, they were slowly poisoning my confidence. But the worst part wasn't Sophie's comments. It was watching Marcus pretend not to hear them. It was the way he'd change the subject or suddenly need to use the bathroom whenever his sister started in on me. It was the way he'd dismiss my concerns later, telling me I was overreacting or misunderstanding her sense of humor. The night before Riley's wedding, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sophie's words, about the way Patricia had looked at me during dinner, about the strange distance I'd been feeling from Marcus lately. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen to make tea. Marcus's phone was charging on the counter, and as I reached for the kettle, it lit up with a text message. The preview showed just enough to make my blood freeze. "Sophie, everything's set for tomorrow. She has no idea." My hand shook as I set down the kettle. The phone screen went dark again, hiding the rest of the message. I stared at it for a long moment, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I could wake Marcus up. I could demand to see the full conversation. I could confront him right then and there. Instead, I made my tea with trembling hands and went back to bed, where I lay awake until sunrise, trying to convince myself that the text meant something innocent. Maybe they were planning a surprise for Riley. Maybe Sophie was organizing something sweet for the reception. But deep down, I already knew. The text wasn't about Riley. It was about me. The morning of Riley's wedding arrived with the kind of perfect weather that makes you believe in fairy tales. Sunshine streaming through gauze curtains, birds singing outside the window, a gentle breeze that promised the day would be everything Riley had dreamed of. I should have been excited. I should have been rushing around with last-minute preparations, texting the other bridesmaids about hair appointments and breakfast plans. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my bridesmaid dress hanging on the closet door, feeling like I was about to attend my own funeral. Marcus had already left for his morning jog, kissing me goodbye with the same casual affection he'd shown every morning for 3 years. If he noticed the dark circles under my eyes, or the way my hand shook when I handed him his coffee, he didn't mention it. "Big day," he'd said, adjusting his running shorts. "You ready for this?" The question felt loaded, like he knew something I didn't. But maybe I was reading too much into everything. Maybe Sophie's text had been innocent. Maybe I was losing my mind. "As ready as I'll ever be," I'd answered, forcing a smile. He'd paused in the doorway, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Just remember, Emma, sometimes things don't go exactly as planned, but that doesn't mean they're wrong." Before I could ask what he meant, he was gone, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the growing certainty that something terrible was about to happen. By 8 a.m., I was at the hotel where Riley was getting ready. The bridal suite was chaos in the best possible way. Hair curlers and makeup brushes everywhere, champagne glasses half empty, bridesmaids in matching robes taking selfies, and laughing at some inside joke I'd missed. Riley looked radiant, even with her hair in rollers and her face half done. She was sitting in the center of it all, like a queen holding court, directing the photographer and making sure everyone had mimosas. "Emma!" She jumped up when she saw me, nearly tripping over the train of her robe. "Thank God you're here! I've been freaking out about the timeline." For the next 2 hours, I threw myself into maid of honor duties with desperate intensity. I coordinated with the photographer, distributed the bridesmaid bouquets, made sure everyone's makeup was photo-ready. I bustled around the suite like a woman possessed, checking and rechecking every detail, because focusing on Riley's perfection was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. But even in the middle of all that beautiful chaos, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The other bridesmaids, Riley's college friends and her younger sister, kept exchanging these looks I couldn't quite interpret. Quick glances when they thought I wasn't watching. Conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. "Emma, can you help me with my necklace?" Riley called from the bathroom. I found her standing in front of the mirror in her underwear and heels, holding a delicate pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Pre-wedding nerves?" I asked, taking the necklace and fastening it around her neck. "Something like that." She met my eyes in the mirror. "Emma, I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" She turned to face me, and I saw tears gathering in her eyes. "I am so sorry. I never wanted this to happen. I tried to fight it, but they said, 'Riley, you're scaring me. What's going on?'" Before she could answer, her sister knocked on the bathroom door. "Riley, the photographer wants to start the getting ready shots." The moment was broken. Riley wiped her eyes and forced a smile. "Coming." She started to walk past me, but I caught her arm. "Riley, what were you going to tell me?" "Nothing. Just wedding stress. You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was, because I'd never seen Riley like this. In all the months of planning, through every crisis and meltdown, she'd never looked at me with such guilt and sadness. "Are you having second thoughts about David?" "No. God, no. David's perfect. It's not about David." "Then what?" "Riley," her mother's voice echoed from the main room. "Time for photos." Riley squeezed my hand. "I love you, Emma. You know that, right? You're my best friend, and I love you." The words should have been comforting, but they sounded like goodbye. The next hour passed in a blur of photographs and final preparations. I helped Riley into her dress, arranged her veil, made sure her lipstick was perfect. Through it all, I kept catching those strange looks from the other bridesmaids, whispered conversations that stopped when I approached, a tension in the room that hadn't been there during any of our previous gatherings. By the time we were ready to head to the church, my nerves were frayed. I'd managed to convince myself that I was imagining things, that the stress of the day was making me paranoid. But as we climbed into the limo, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The other bridesmaids were all carrying small clutch purses that matched their dresses. I'd ordered them months ago, along with matching jewelry and shoes. But sitting in the limo, I realized I was the only one without a purse. "Where's my clutch?" I asked Riley's sister, Sarah. She looked confused. "Your what?" "My bridesmaid clutch. I ordered them for everyone. You all have yours." The silence in the limo was deafening. The other bridesmaids suddenly found their phones very interesting. Riley was staring out the window like she hadn't heard me. "Riley?" I said, my voice sharper than intended. She finally looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes again. "Emma, we're here," the driver announced, pulling up to the church. The moment was lost again as everyone rushed to get out of the limo without wrinkles. But I noticed that Sarah grabbed an extra clutch from the floor of the limo and handed it to someone I couldn't see through the tinted windows. Inside the church, the chaos of final preparations consumed everything. The wedding coordinator was rushing around with her clipboard. The photographer was positioning people for photos, and the groom's family was arriving in their formal wear. That's when I saw her. Sophie, walking through the front doors of the church in a bridesmaid dress, identical to mine. My heart stopped. She was wearing the exact same champagne-colored dress, the same shoes, the same jewelry. Her hair was done in the same updo the rest of us were wearing. She looked like she belonged. "What is Sophie doing here?" I asked Riley, grabbing her arm. Riley's face went white. "Emma, I can explain." "Explain what? Why is Marcus's sister dressed like a bridesmaid at your wedding?" Before Riley could answer, the wedding coordinator appeared at my elbow. "Emma, there's been a small change to the processional. Can I speak with you privately?" I followed her to a corner of the church lobby, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear her over the blood rushing in my ears. "I need you to sit in the second row instead of walking down the aisle," she said, not meeting my eyes. "What?" "There's been a last-minute change. Family dynamics, you understand? The bride asked me to let you know that—" "Where is Riley?" "She's getting final photos done. But she wanted me to tell you that she's so sorry, and she hopes you'll understand that sometimes these things happen, and—" I walked away before she could finish. I pushed through the crowd of guests and wedding party members, looking for Riley. I found her in the bridal suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids, with Sophie now standing among them like she'd been there all along. "Riley, what the hell is going on?" Everyone turned to look at me. Riley's face was streaked with tears. Her carefully applied makeup smudged. "Emma, please don't make this harder than it already is." "Make what harder?" "Someone needs to explain to me why I'm being told to sit in the audience at the wedding where I'm supposed to be the maid of honor." Sophie stepped forward, and I saw the satisfied smile she'd been hiding all these weeks. "Emma, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Riley asked me to be her maid of honor." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's impossible. Riley and I have been planning this for months. We've been best friends since college. This is our thing." "Actually," Sophie continued, her voice gentle but her eyes cruel, "Riley realized she wanted family to stand with her. Someone who really knows her. Someone who can handle the pressure." I looked at Riley, waiting for her to correct this obvious lie, waiting for her to tell Sophie that she was wrong, that I was her best friend, that we'd promised each other this moment years ago. Instead, Riley wouldn't meet my eyes. "Riley, tell me this isn't true." "Emma, I'm sorry. I know we talked about it, but things changed. My mom thought it would be better if—" "Your mom? What does your mom have to do with this?" Sarah stepped forward. "Emma, you need to calm down. This is Riley's wedding day. You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene? I'm making a scene because I just found out that my best friend replaced me as her maid of honor and didn't bother to tell me until 30 minutes before the ceremony?" "We didn't want to hurt your feelings," Riley whispered. "By lying to me? By letting me plan your entire wedding, thinking I was going to be standing next to you? By letting me organize your bridal shower and your bachelorette party and coordinate with vendors and address invitations and—" "Emma, stop." Sophie's voice was firm. "This is what Riley wants. This is what's best for everyone." I stared at her, finally understanding. "This was your plan all along, wasn't it? All those comments about confidence, about me not being a leader, you were setting this up." Sophie's smile was cold. "I just helped Riley realize what she really wanted." "Riley, look at me." I stepped closer to my best friend, the person I trusted more than anyone in the world. "Look at me and tell me this is what you want." She finally raised her eyes to mine, and I saw the truth there. This wasn't what she wanted. This was what she'd been pressured into, but she was too weak to fight it. "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry." The wedding coordinator appeared again, clipboard in hand. "Ladies, we need to start the processional. Everyone in position, please." The other bridesmaids filed out of the room, leaving me standing there in my matching dress, holding my bouquet, feeling like I was in some kind of nightmare. Sophie paused at the door. "Emma, your seat is in the second row, behind Marcus's family." After they left, I stood alone in the empty bridal suite, surrounded by the debris of getting ready. Makeup brushes and hairspray and empty champagne glasses. Evidence of the morning I'd spent helping Riley prepare for the day that was supposed to be ours. I could hear the music starting in the sanctuary. The wedding march, the sound of people rising to their feet. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. Marcus's car was there. He'd known. He'd known this was going to happen, and he'd said nothing. That text message. "Everything's set for tomorrow. She has no idea." They had planned this. His family had orchestrated my humiliation, and he had let them. I could leave. I could walk out of the church and never look back. But I found myself walking toward the sanctuary instead, drawn by some masochistic need to witness my own destruction. The church was packed. Riley's family filled the left side, David's family on the right. I found the second row behind Marcus's family and sat down, my hands shaking as I clutched my bouquet. The processional music swelled, and the bridesmaids began walking down the aisle. Riley's sister first, then her college friends. Each of them looked beautiful, confident, perfect. Then came Sophie, walking down the aisle in my place. She moved with the grace of someone who belonged there, someone who had always been meant to stand next to the bride. When she reached the altar, she turned and smiled at the congregation, and I saw pure triumph in her eyes. The bride's march began, and everyone rose. Riley appeared at the back of the church, radiant in her white dress, her arm linked with her father's. She looked like a fairy tale princess, everything I'd helped her achieve. As she walked past my row, our eyes met for just a moment. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," but kept walking. I sat through the entire ceremony in a daze. I watched Sophie stand where I was supposed to stand. I watched her hold Riley's bouquet during the vows. I watched her straighten Riley's train and adjust her veil. I watched my best friend get married while I sat in the audience like a stranger. When the ceremony ended and the recessional began, I stayed in my seat while everyone else filed out. I couldn't move. I couldn't process what had just happened. Marcus appeared at my elbow. "Emma, are you coming to the reception?" I looked up at him. This man I'd been planning to marry. This man who'd watched his family destroy me and done nothing to stop it. "Did you know?" He sat down beside me, and I saw guilt written all over his face. "Emma, I can explain. Did you know they were going to do this to me? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Sophie just mentioned that Riley seemed stressed about the maid of honor thing, and Mom suggested that maybe family would be better, and then Riley's mother agreed, and how long have you known? Emma, please, let's not do this here." "How long, Marcus?" He sighed. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. He'd known for 2 weeks that his family was planning to humiliate me, and he'd said nothing. He'd watched me stress about details and timelines and making everything perfect for Riley. He'd listened to me worry about Sophie's comments and told me I was being paranoid. He'd lied to me for 2 weeks. "They said you didn't look confident enough during the rehearsals," he said quietly. I turned to stare at him. "What rehearsals? We haven't even had the rehearsal dinner yet." "The practice run. Last week, when you were at Riley's apartment, going over the processional timing." I remembered that afternoon. Riley had wanted to walk through the ceremony choreography to make sure everyone knew their positions. It had been casual, just the wedding party in Riley's living room, figuring out who would stand where. "You mean when I was helping coordinate 8 people and making sure everything would run smoothly?" "Mom said you looked overwhelmed, like you were struggling to keep up." "I was organizing everyone else. I was making sure the ceremony would be perfect." "I know." I tried to tell them that. But Sophie said... "Sophie said what?" Marcus looked away. She said that leadership isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about making other people feel confident and secure, and that maybe you were so focused on being perfect that you weren't thinking about what was best for Riley. The words hit me like a slap. So this is my fault? I got replaced because I cared too much about doing a good job? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that maybe they had a point about what, Marcus? About me not being good enough? About me not deserving to stand next to my best friend on the most important day of her life? About you maybe being too in your head about everything. Sophie said that when she stood in your position during the practice run, everything felt more natural, more relaxed. I stood up so fast, I nearly knocked over the pew. When did Sophie stand in my position during the practice run? I don't know. After you left, I guess. Riley wanted to try it with someone else. Just to see. Just to see what? How easily I could be replaced? Marcus reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Emma, I love you. This doesn't change anything between us. This changes everything between us. I walked out of the church, leaving him sitting there. I didn't go to the reception. I didn't say goodbye to Riley or congratulate David or pretend that everything was fine. I went home, took off my bridesmaid dress, and sat on my couch in my underwear, trying to understand what had just happened to my life. At 11 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Riley. Emma, please call me. I need to explain. I deleted it without responding. At midnight, Marcus came home. I heard his key in the lock, heard him moving around the kitchen, heard him pause outside the bedroom door. Emma, are you awake? I didn't answer. He came in anyway, sitting on the edge of the bed. We need to talk about this. Do we? Because it seems like all the talking happened without me. That's not fair. I sat up, and he could see the tears I'd been crying for hours. What's not fair, Marcus? That I'm upset about being betrayed by everyone I trusted? That I'm hurt that my fiancé watched his family humiliate me and did nothing to stop it? It wasn't supposed to be humiliating. It was supposed to be what was best for everyone. Best for everyone except me. Emma, you're being dramatic. It's just a wedding. It's one day. Just a wedding. Just one day. Like the months of planning meant nothing. Like the promise Riley and I had made meant nothing. Like my feelings meant nothing. Get out, I said quietly. Emma, come on. Let's talk about this like adults. Get out! He left, and I locked the door behind him. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the day. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment when I should have seen what was coming. But the worst part wasn't the humiliation. It wasn't even the loss of my best friend. It was the realization that the man I'd planned to marry, the man I'd supported and loved and built a life with, had chosen his family's cruelty over my dignity. And I was starting to understand that this was just the beginning. Have you ever had someone you trusted completely stab you in the back? Tell me in the comments what happened. I have a feeling I'm not the only one who's been here. The week after the wedding was the loneliest of my life. Marcus slept on the couch for 3 nights, then went to stay with his parents when I refused to talk to him. Riley called 12 times and sent countless texts that I deleted without reading. Sophie, predictably, didn't reach out at all. I took sick days from work, something I'd never done unless I was actually dying. I couldn't face the sympathetic looks from my colleagues who'd heard about the wedding through the hospital gossip network. I couldn't pretend everything was fine when my entire world had collapsed in the span of 2 hours. On Thursday morning, I was lying in bed at 11 a.m., still in the same pajamas I'd worn for 3 days, when my doorbell rang. I ignored it. It rang again and again. Emma, I know you're in there. Please open the door. Riley's voice, muffled through the wood but unmistakably desperate. I pulled a pillow over my head and waited for her to give up. Instead, I heard the sound of a key in the lock. She still had my spare key from when she'd watched my apartment during my vacation last year. Emma? Her footsteps in my hallway, the creak of my bedroom door opening. Oh, honey. I felt the bed dip as she sat down next to me, her hand on my back, tentative and warm. The familiar smell of her perfume that had once been comforting and now made me want to vomit. Go away, Riley. I can't. Not until we talk. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. I didn't have a choice, Emma. You have to understand that. I sat up then, finally looking at her. She looked terrible. Her skin was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Good. She should look terrible. You didn't have a choice? You didn't have a choice but to lie to me for weeks? You didn't have a choice but to let me plan your entire wedding thinking I was going to be your maid of honor? My mother. Your mother what? Held a gun to your head? Threatened to disown you if you didn't humiliate your best friend? Riley's eyes filled with tears. She said that having Marcus's sister as maid of honor would be better for family harmony, that it would help merge our families. She said that you'd understand because you're so supportive and selfless. So, this is my fault for being too supportive? No! That's not what I meant. Emma, please, you have to believe me. I never wanted this to happen. I fought it as hard as I could. Really? Because it seemed like you gave up pretty easily. I didn't give up. I told my mom no for weeks. I told her we'd made a pact, that you were my best friend, that it wasn't fair to you. But you changed your mind anyway. Riley wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. They wore me down. My mom, Marcus's mom, Sophie. They kept saying that having Sophie as maid of honor would bring our families closer together, that it was the mature thing to do, that real friendship means putting the other person's happiness first. And my happiness didn't matter? Of course it mattered. But they made it sound like I was being selfish by insisting on having you as maid of honor, like I was prioritizing our friendship over my marriage. I stared at her, this person I'd known for 7 years, this person I'd considered my sister. So you chose your marriage over our friendship. I chose to avoid conflict on my wedding day by creating conflict with me instead. I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd be upset for a little while, but then you'd forgive me because you love me. The casual assumption in her words made me furious. The idea that my love for her was something she could count on, no matter how badly she treated me. You thought I'd just roll over and take it because that's what I always do. That's exactly what you thought. Good old Emma. She'll be hurt, but she'll get over it. She always does. She's so understanding, so forgiving, so easy to walk all over. Riley flinched. I don't think of you that way. Yes, you do. You all do. Marcus's family has been treating me like their personal servant for 2 years, and I let them because I thought it meant I was earning my place. You let them orchestrate my humiliation because you thought I'd just accept it and move on. Emma, that's not fair. What's not fair is that I spent 6 months planning your wedding. What's not fair is that I used my vacation days to organize your bridal shower. What's not fair is that I spent my own money on your bachelorette party and your gifts and coordinating with vendors. What's not fair is that I did all of that thinking I was doing it for my best friend, when really I was just the unpaid wedding planner who got fired at the last minute. Riley was crying openly now. I'll make it up to you. I'll do anything. Just please don't let this ruin our friendship. You already ruined our friendship. The moment you decided Sophie's feelings mattered more than mine. That's not what happened. Then tell me what happened, Riley. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you let a bunch of people convince you that I wasn't good enough to stand next to you on your wedding day. She was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. They said you looked uncomfortable during the practice run, that you seemed stressed and overwhelmed, that maybe the pressure of being maid of honor was too much for you. I looked uncomfortable because I was trying to coordinate 8 people who weren't paying attention. I looked stressed because I was making sure everything would run perfectly for you. I know that now, but at the time, when Sophie stepped in and everything just flowed so easily, it seemed like maybe they were right. Sophie stepped in during the practice run? Riley nodded, not meeting my eyes. After you left, my mom suggested we try it with Sophie, just to see how it felt. And it did feel easier. Sophie knew exactly where to stand, exactly when to move. She made it look effortless. Because she'd been planning this. She knew exactly where to stand because she'd been studying my role for weeks, waiting for her chance to take it. I didn't know that then, but you know it now. Riley finally looked at me. Marcus told me yesterday about the text messages between him and Sophie, about how they'd been discussing it for weeks. My blood went cold. What text messages? The ones where they were planning how to convince me to make the switch. Sophie had been working on it since the engagement party. She told Marcus that having her as maid of honor would be better for family dynamics, and he agreed to help her convince everyone. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Marcus was in on it from the beginning. He said it wasn't malicious. He said they really thought it would be better for everyone. Everyone except me. Emma, I am so sorry. I should have fought harder. I should have told them all to go to hell and kept you as my maid of honor, no matter what they said. Yes, you should have. Can you forgive me? Please? I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you. I looked at her. This person who'd been my closest friend for 7 years. This person I'd trusted with my deepest secrets and biggest fears. This person who'd promised we'd always have each other's backs. I can't, I said quietly. Emma, please. I can't forgive you, Riley. Not because I don't want to, but because I can't trust you anymore. How do I know that the next time someone pressures you to choose between me and what's convenient, you won't throw me under the bus again? I would never. You already did. And the worst part is that you're sitting here asking me to forgive you, but you haven't once acknowledged that what you did was wrong. You keep making excuses about family pressure and wedding stress, but you haven't said that you were wrong to lie to me. You haven't said that you were wrong to let them replace me. You haven't taken responsibility for anything. Riley stared at me for a long moment. You're right. I was wrong. I was a terrible friend, and I was a coward, and I let people manipulate me into hurting the person I care about most. And I don't know how to fix it. You can't fix it. It's done. She started crying again, these desperate, gulping sobs that might have broken my heart a week ago. Now they just made me tired. I should go, she said finally. Yes, you should. She stood up, then paused at the bedroom door. Emma, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but Marcus loves you. Whatever happened with the wedding, he really does love you. After she left, I sat in my empty apartment and thought about her words. Marcus loves me. Maybe he did, in his own selfish, conditional way. But if this was what his love looked like, I didn't want it. That evening, Marcus came home. I heard him moving around the kitchen, probably hoping I'd come out and talk to him. When I didn't, he knocked on the bedroom door. Emma, can I come in? It's your apartment too. He opened the door cautiously, like he was approaching a wild animal. How are you feeling? How do you think I'm feeling? He sat down in the chair across from the bed, maintaining distance. Riley told me she came by today. Did she tell you what we talked about? Some of it. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Emma, I need you to know that I never meant for things to happen the way they did. But you did mean for them to happen. I meant for Sophie to be maid of honor, yes, but I didn't mean for you to find out at the last minute. I didn't mean for it to be humiliating. How exactly did you think it was going to work, Marcus? Were you planning to tell me the night before, the morning of? Or were you just going to let me show up and figure it out myself? I thought Riley would tell you. I thought she'd explain that there had been a change in plans and that you'd understand. Understand what? That your sister's more important than my feelings? Understand that sometimes family has to come first. I sat up straighter. I thought I was going to be your family. You are my family. But Sophie is my sister. And Riley is my best friend. Or was my best friend. That's different. How is it different? Marcus looked uncomfortable. Blood family is different. It's permanent. Friendships can change, but family is forever. So what am I to you, Marcus, if not family? You're the woman I love. You're the woman I want to marry. But I'm not family. Not yet, but you will be. When? After we're married? After I've proven myself worthy? After I've spent enough years serving your family's needs? Emma, that's not fair. What's not fair is that you watched your family treat me like hired help for 2 years and never once stood up for me. What's not fair is that you participated in a plan to humiliate me and then acted surprised when I got upset about it. I didn't think you'd be this upset. You didn't think I'd be upset about being betrayed by everyone I trusted? I thought you'd be disappointed, but then you'd see that it was for the best. I stared at him, this man I'd been planning to spend my life with. For the best according to who? According to everyone. My family likes Sophie better as maid of honor. Riley's family thought it would be good for family unity. Sophie was excited about the role. And what about me? What about what I wanted? I thought you wanted Riley to be happy. I wanted to be the person standing next to my best friend on the most important day of her life. I wanted the role I'd been promised, the role I'd earned through months of planning and preparation. I wanted to matter. You do matter. Not enough to fight for. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "What do you want me to do? How do I fix this?" You can't fix it. There has to be something. Some way to make this right. There's no making this right, Marcus. You can't undo what happened. You can't take back the choice you made. You can't make me trust you again. So that's it? We're just done? I looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in months. I saw a man who was more concerned with avoiding conflict than protecting the woman he claimed to love. I saw someone who would choose the path of least resistance over doing what was right. I saw someone who would sacrifice my dignity for his family's approval. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I think we're done." The next morning, Marcus packed a bag and left for his parents' house. That afternoon, I called in sick to work again and spent the day in bed, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. I'd lost my best friend. I'd lost my fiancé. I'd lost the future I'd been planning for 3 years. But as devastating as it was, there was also something liberating about it. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about pleasing anyone but myself. I didn't have to carefully manage Marcus's mother's moods or find excuses for Sophie's passive-aggressive comments. I didn't have to pretend that being treated like a servant was actually love. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, opened a bottle of wine, and watched a romantic comedy that Marcus would have hated. I painted my nails bright red, a color he'd always said looked too aggressive on me. I called my sister in California and told her everything. "Jesus, Emma," she said when I finished the story. "What a bunch of psychopaths. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should have just been understanding about the family dynamics thing." "Are you kidding me?" They planned your humiliation for weeks and then told you it was your fault for not being confident enough. If someone did that to me, I'd burn their entire lives to the ground. I don't want to burn anyone's life to the ground. I just want to move on. Sweetie, sometimes moving on isn't enough. Sometimes people need to face consequences for their actions. I went to bed that night thinking about her words, about consequences, about the fact that Marcus and his family were probably sitting around their dinner table, talking about how dramatically I'd overreacted, about how they dodged a bullet by seeing my true colors before the wedding. The thought made my blood boil. The next day, I finally went back to work. My colleagues were kind but cautious, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. My supervisor, Janet, pulled me aside during lunch. "Emma, I don't know what happened at that wedding, but you look like you've been through hell. Do you want to talk about it?" I told her everything, about the years of financial and emotional support I'd given Marcus's family, about the wedding betrayal, about discovering that Marcus had been in on it from the beginning. "My God," Janet said when I finished. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. Move on, I guess." Move on? Emma, they used you for 2 years and then publicly humiliated you. You can't just let that slide. What choice do I have? You have more choices than you think. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and started making lists. All the money I'd spent on Marcus's family over the years, all the unpaid labor I'd provided, all the ways they'd taken advantage of my generosity. The numbers were staggering. Between gifts, loans, groceries, babysitting, cleaning, transportation, and event planning, I'd given them thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of my time. And they'd repaid me by orchestrating the most humiliating experience of my life. I was done being understanding. I was done being the bigger person. I was done letting them get away with treating me like garbage. It was time for consequences. What would you do if someone did this to you? Just accept it and move on, or make sure they face the music. Tell me in the comments, because I'm about to show you exactly what I chose. The first thing I did was make a phone call that would change everything. Not to a lawyer, not to a therapist, but to someone far more dangerous to Marcus and his family's future, their business loan officer at First National Bank. You see, what Marcus's family didn't know was that when I'd co-signed that business loan for their furniture store 18 months ago, I'd become more than just a guarantor. I'd become a partner with legal rights to information about the business's financial status. Rights I'd never exercised because I trusted them. That trust was officially dead. Hi, this is Emma Peterson. I'm calling about the business loan for Family Craft Furniture, account number 47829B. I'm a co-signer on the account. Of course, Ms. Peterson. How can I help you today? I'd like to request a full financial review of the account, including payment history, current balance, and any pending issues. There was a pause. Is there a specific concern you'd like to address? I'm considering some changes to my financial commitments and need to understand my current exposure. What I learned in that 20-minute phone call made my hands shake with rage. The business was 3 months behind on payments. They owed $47,000 on the original loan, plus penalties and interest. Marcus had taken out a secondary line of credit against the business without informing me, despite my co-signer status, giving me the right to be notified of any additional debt. But the worst part? They'd been using my excellent credit score to secure additional financing for personal expenses, a boat loan, credit cards, even a mortgage refinance on Patricia's house. My name was attached to over $200,000 in debt that I knew nothing about. I hung up the phone and immediately called my bank to freeze my accounts and check my credit report. What I found there made me physically sick. 17 credit inquiries in the past year, all connected to Marcus's family's financial applications. My credit score had dropped 60 points because of late payments on accounts I'd never opened. There were collection notices for medical bills belonging to Sophie's ex-husband that had somehow been linked to my Social Security number. They hadn't just humiliated me at the wedding. They'd been financially ruining me for over a year. I spent the next 3 days meeting with a financial advisor, a lawyer, and a private investigator. What I learned painted a picture of systematic fraud that went far beyond wedding drama. Marcus's family had been using my personal information to secure credit for months. They'd forged my signature on documents, used my employment information to inflate their income claims, and listed me as a reference without my knowledge on multiple loan applications. This is identity theft, my lawyer, Sarah Chen, told me grimly. Not just poor financial decisions or family drama, actual prosecutable fraud. What are my options? Criminal charges, civil suit, or both? With this level of documentation, you could probably get them for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. We're talking serious jail time. I sat in her office, staring at the stack of evidence we'd compiled. Bank statements, credit reports, forged documents, a paper trail that could destroy Marcus's entire family. There's something else, Sarah continued. The business is failing. They're about to default on multiple loans, and when they do, the creditors will come after you for the full amounts, unless you act first. What do you mean? You have grounds to claim fraud and have your name removed from these accounts, but only if you press charges. If you don't, you'll be legally responsible for their debt when the business collapses. I was looking at a choice between financial ruin and destroying the family of the man I'd almost married. It wasn't really a choice at all. That evening, I did something I'd never done before. I started planning someone else's destruction with the same meticulous attention to detail I'd once used to plan Riley's wedding. First, I gathered every piece of evidence: bank statements, emails, text messages, photos of forged documents. I created a timeline of every fraudulent transaction, every lie, every moment when they'd used my trust against me. Then, I made a list of everyone who needed to know the truth: the bank, the credit reporting agencies, the district attorney's office, the local business licensing board, the Internal Revenue Service, and finally, I compiled a list of every favor, every loan, every act of unpaid service I'd provided over the past 2 years. Not because I wanted payment, but because I wanted documentation of the pattern of exploitation. By the time I finished, it was 3 a.m. I had a 30-page file that would unravel Marcus's family's entire financial life. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I called my supervisor at the hospital. "Janet, I need to ask you about something confidential. When we did those charity drives for low-income families last year, didn't we donate furniture to several families?" "Yes, we partnered with local businesses to provide household items. Why?" "Do you remember which businesses we worked with?" She pulled up the records. "Let's see. Family Craft Furniture was one of our biggest donors. They provided over $15,000 worth of furniture to families in need. Really wonderful people. Wonderful people who had claimed those donations as tax write-offs while charging the charity full retail price for furniture that cost them a fraction to make." Another layer of fraud to add to my growing file. "Emma, is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine. Just following up on something." That afternoon, I drove to Family Craft Furniture for the first time since the wedding. I parked across the street and watched the store for an hour, taking notes on customer traffic, employee behavior, and general operations. The place looked shabby. Paint peeling on the storefront, half the neon sign burned out, clearance banners covering most of the windows. It was obvious they were struggling. Sophie was working the register, looking bored and scrolling through her phone between customers. Marcus was in the back, arguing with someone on the phone, probably a creditor. I felt a strange satisfaction watching them stress about money while having no idea that their financial apocalypse was sitting in a file folder in my car. That evening, Marcus called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Emma, we need to talk. Do we? I've been thinking about what you said, about family and priorities and standing up for you. And you're right. I should have fought harder for you. I should have told Sophie no from the beginning. You should have, but you didn't. I'm calling to apologize and to ask if there's any way we can work through this. I almost laughed. He had no idea that while he was offering empty apologies, I was holding evidence that could send him to prison. Marcus, I think it's too late for apologies. Please, Emma, I love you. I know I screwed up, but I love you. If this is what your love looks like, I don't want it. What do you want me to do? I'll do anything. There's nothing you can do. It's over. Emma, please, don't throw away 3 years over one mistake. One mistake, like systematic fraud and public humiliation, was just an oops moment. Goodbye, Marcus. I hung up and immediately called Sarah Chen. I want to file charges. All of them. Fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, everything. Are you sure? Once we start this process, there's no going back. I'm sure. This will destroy their business. Probably their personal finances too. Good. The next morning, I did something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I quit my job. Not forever, just for a month. I had vacation time saved up, and I needed to be available for what was coming next. Janet was understanding when I explained that I was dealing with a legal situation that required my full attention. Take care of yourself, Emma, and don't let whoever hurt you get away with it. I spent that first day of freedom in meetings. Police station to file the identity theft report. District Attorney's Office to provide evidence for the fraud case. Banking Commission to report the illegal use of my credit information. Each conversation felt like dropping a bomb. The investigators were shocked by the scope of the fraud. The DA's office immediately opened a formal investigation. The Banking Commission froze all accounts associated with the business pending review. By the end of the day, Marcus's family's financial life was officially under federal investigation. That evening, my phone exploded with angry calls and texts. Marcus, what the hell did you do? The police were here asking questions about fraud. Sophie, you vindictive bitch! You're trying to destroy our family. Patricia, Emma, I don't know what lies you've been telling, but this has gone too far. I turned off my phone and opened a bottle of wine. For the first time in weeks, I felt something approaching peace. The next few days passed in a blur of legal appointments and documentation. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected because the evidence was so clear. Forged signatures on loan documents, falsified income statements, credit applications, using my information without consent. On Friday, exactly 1 week after I'd filed the initial report, the police arrested Marcus at the furniture store. The charges were extensive: identity theft, bank fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and forgery. Sophie was arrested at her apartment that afternoon. Patricia was brought in for questioning, but released pending further investigation. I watched the local news that evening, seeing footage of Marcus being led away in handcuffs. The reporter described it as a complex fraud scheme involving multiple victims and hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen credit. Multiple victims. It turned out I wasn't the only one they'd been scamming. The investigation had uncovered at least 6 other people, whose identities had been used for fraudulent loans and credit applications. But I was the only one who'd had the documentation and legal standing to bring it all down. My phone had been ringing nonstop since the arrests, but I ignored every call. There was nothing any of them could say that would change what they'd done or what was happening to them now. On Sunday, Riley showed up at my apartment again. This time, she looked like she'd been crying for days. "Emma, please, you have to stop this." "Stop what?" "The charges against Marcus. The investigation. He could go to prison." "He could. Probably will. Emma, he made a mistake, but he doesn't deserve to have his life ruined." "A mistake? Riley, he stole my identity. He committed fraud. He's been using my credit for over a year without my knowledge." "But you loved him. You were going to marry him." "I love someone who doesn't exist. The real Marcus is a thief and a liar." "What about Sophie? She has kids, Emma. If she goes to prison, what happens to her daughters?" I felt a flicker of sympathy for Sophie's children, but it passed quickly. She should have thought about that before she committed multiple felonies. "Please, I'm begging you, drop the charges." "I can't drop criminal charges, Riley. They're being prosecuted by the state now." "But you could tell them you don't want to press charges. You could say it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate pattern of fraud that could have destroyed my financial future." Riley was crying again. "I feel like this is all my fault. If I hadn't let them replace you at the wedding, none of this would have happened." "You're right. It is partially your fault. But Marcus and Sophie would have continued stealing from me whether or not you'd grown a spine." "Emma, please. For our friendship, drop the charges." I looked at her, this person who'd betrayed me at the wedding and was now asking me to protect the people who'd been stealing from me. "Our friendship ended when you chose Sophie over me. This has nothing to do with friendship and everything to do with justice. You're destroying innocent people." "I'm not destroying anyone. They destroyed themselves when they chose to commit crimes." Riley left without another word. That night, I blocked her number. The following week brought more revelations. The IRS launched their own investigation into the business's tax fraud. The State Business Licensing Board revoked Family Craft Furniture's license. The bank foreclosed on the store and initiated collection proceedings against all loan guarantors, except me. Thanks to the fraud charges, my name was being removed from all the accounts. I would walk away from this disaster without owing a penny. Marcus and Sophie, on the other hand, were looking at bankruptcy, criminal records, and potential prison time. The final blow came when the local newspaper picked up the story. Local business owners charged with elaborate fraud scheme. The article detailed the charges, the victims, and the scope of the financial crimes. It was front-page news for 3 days running. That Thursday, I received an unexpected visitor, Patricia, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "Emma, may I come in?" I considered slamming the door in her face. Instead, I stepped aside and let her enter. She sat on my couch like she was afraid it might collapse under her weight. I wanted to apologize. For what specifically? For everything. For the way we treated you, for the wedding, for what Marcus and Sophie did with your credit. "Did you know about the fraud?" Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "Not all of it. I knew they were struggling with money. I knew they'd asked you to co-sign the business loan, but I didn't know about the other accounts." "But you suspected something." "Maybe. I chose not to ask questions. Because it was easier to let them steal from me than to face the truth about your children." "Yes." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Emma. You were good to us, and we repaid you terribly." "Why are you here, Patricia?" because my son is facing 10 years in prison, and my daughter might lose her children, and I know it's all because we taught them that using people was acceptable. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or false emotion. All I saw was exhaustion and genuine remorse. What do you want from me? Nothing. I know you can't undo what's been done. I just wanted you to know that you were right to fight back. We deserve this. After she left, I sat in my living room and tried to process the conversation. For 2 years, I'd been desperate for Patricia's approval. Now she was acknowledging that I'd been right all along, and it felt hollow. That weekend, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called Sarah Chen and asked her to arrange a meeting with the prosecutors. I want to offer testimony that might help with Sophie's sentencing. What kind of testimony? Character testimony about her children, about how they'll be affected if she goes to prison. Emma, are you sure? After everything they did to you? I'm sure. I want justice, but I don't want those little girls to suffer for their mother's crimes. That's unexpectedly generous of you. It's not generous, it's human. The meeting with the prosecutors went better than expected. They agreed to consider a plea deal for Sophie that would involve house arrest and community service instead of prison time, in exchange for her full cooperation with the investigation and restitution payments. Marcus wasn't so lucky. His role as the primary orchestrator of the fraud meant he was looking at serious prison time regardless of any plea deals. As I left the prosecutor's office that day, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness exactly, but a sense that justice was being served and that I'd maintained my humanity in the process. The girl, who would have silently accepted their betrayal, was gone. In her place was someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to fight for it. But the biggest shock was still coming, and it would change everything I thought I knew about revenge. When you stand up for yourself, do you ever worry you're going too far? Or do you think some people deserve everything they get? Drop your thoughts below, because what happened next will make you question everything about forgiveness. 3 weeks after Marcus's arrest, I was grocery shopping when I heard a familiar voice behind me in the cereal aisle. Emma? I turned around to find David, Riley's husband, looking uncomfortable and unsure. He was alone, pushing a cart filled with what looked like bachelor food, frozen dinners, instant coffee, beer. Hi, David. I wasn't sure if I should approach you. Riley said you two aren't speaking. We're not. He nodded, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Can I ask you something? And please, just be honest with me. What? Did Riley know about what Marcus and Sophie were doing to you? The fraud stuff? I studied his face, trying to read his expression. Why are you asking? Because she's been acting strange ever since the arrests. Guilty. More guilty than just replacing you at the wedding would explain. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She keeps talking about how it's all her fault. How she should have warned you. How she should have spoken up sooner. He paused, running his hand through his hair. Emma, I think she knew more than she told you. How much more? I don't know. She won't talk to me about it. But last night, I found her going through old text messages and crying. When I asked what was wrong, she said she'd helped ruin your life, and there was no way to fix it. I felt the familiar anger rising in my chest. But this time, it was mixed with something else. Betrayal so deep, it made my bones ache. David, I need you to tell me exactly what Riley said. She said that she knew Marcus's family was having money problems. She said Sophie had asked her not to tell you because they were embarrassed. And she said that when they suggested replacing you as maid of honor, part of the reason was that they were afraid you'd find out about their financial situation and get upset. She knew they were using me for money and said nothing. I think so. Emma, I'm so sorry. I had no idea any of this was happening, or I would have told you myself. I stood there in the grocery store, holding a box of granola, feeling like my world was tilting sideways again. Riley hadn't just betrayed me at the wedding. She'd been complicit in the financial fraud. David, I need to ask you for a favor. Anything. I need you to get Riley to tell you everything she knows. And I need you to record the conversation. His eyes widened. Emma, I can't spy on my wife. Your wife helped cover up a crime that could have destroyed my financial future. If she has information that could help the prosecution's case, she needs to provide it. But if I record her without her knowing, then maybe she'll finally tell the truth. David looked torn. What if she doesn't know as much as I think she does? Then we'll find that out, too. That evening, David called me. I have the recording, but Emma, you're not going to like what you hear. He came over an hour later with his phone and a bottle of wine. I think I'm going to need this, he said, uncorking the bottle. We sat on my couch as he played the recording. Riley's voice filled the room, and with every word, I felt my heart breaking all over again. I knew they were in trouble financially. Sophie told me months ago that they were behind on the business loan and that Emma was the co-signer. She said they were worried Emma would find out and demand they pay her back immediately, which would force them into bankruptcy. So, when they suggested replacing Emma as maid of honor, you went along with it to protect their secret? Not just that. Sophie said that having Emma as maid of honor would mean she'd be in all the wedding photos. And if the business failed and went to court, having her prominently featured in our wedding would make it look like we were all friends and that she'd willingly participated in their financial arrangements. Riley, that makes no sense. It made sense to me at the time. Sophie said that Emma was too trusting, too generous, and that people like that need to be protected from themselves. She said that if Emma knew how bad their financial situation was, she'd probably offer to help even more. And that wouldn't be fair to Emma. So you were protecting Emma by lying to her? I thought I was. And honestly, David, I was also protecting us. If Emma's name was all over our wedding photos, and then she sued Marcus's family for the money they owed her, it could have looked like we were involved somehow. Jesus Christ, Riley! I know how it sounds now. But at the time, Sophie made it seem like we were doing the right thing, like we were saving everyone from an awkward situation. And you believed her. I wanted to believe her, because if I didn't believe her, then I'd have to admit that I was prioritizing my own comfort over my best friend's well-being. There was a long pause in the recording. Riley, do you understand what you did? I helped them steal from her. I helped them lie to her. I helped them humiliate her. And then I acted like I was the victim when she got angry about it. David stopped the recording. There's more, but it gets worse. How could it possibly get worse? She knew about the forged signatures. Sophie showed her copies of the loan documents with your signature on them, and Riley recognized that the handwriting didn't look like yours. But she didn't say anything. I felt like I was going to be sick. She knew they were forging my signature and said nothing? She said she convinced herself that maybe you'd signed them when you were tired or distracted, and that's why the handwriting looked different. That's not convincing herself. That's willful blindness. David nodded, looking miserable. Emma, what are you going to do with this information? I'm going to turn it over to the prosecutors. That could make Riley an accessory to fraud. Then maybe she should have thought about that before she became an accessory to fraud. The next morning, I called Sarah Chen and asked her to meet me at her office. I brought David's recording and a written statement detailing everything I knew about Riley's involvement. This changes the case significantly, Sarah said after listening to the recording. Your friend was clearly aware of the fraudulent activity and chose not to report it. That makes her complicit. What kind of charges could she face? Conspiracy, accessory after the fact, possibly obstruction of justice, if she's been lying to investigators. And David, he's the one who made the recording. David should be fine. He's coming forward voluntarily with evidence of a crime. The fact that he recorded his wife without her knowledge is problematic from a relationship standpoint, but not from a legal one. That afternoon, I did something that felt both necessary and heartbreaking. I called the prosecutor's office and asked to schedule a meeting to provide additional evidence in the fraud case. 2 days later, I sat in a sterile conference room with 2 prosecutors, an FBI agent, and a court reporter, providing testimony about Riley's knowledge of and participation in the fraud scheme. Ms. Peterson, in your opinion, was Ms. Riley Williams aware that fraudulent documents were being created using your personal information? Yes, based on the recorded conversation with her husband, she was shown forged documents with my signature and chose not to report it. And was she aware that you were being financially exploited by the defendants? Yes. She admitted to knowing about their financial problems and their debt to me months before the wedding. Did she ever warn you about these issues? No. She actively participated in concealing them from me. The questioning went on for 2 hours. By the end, I felt drained but resolute. Riley had made her choices. Now she would face the consequences. That evening, David called me. They arrested Riley this morning. I'm sorry, David. No, you're not. And you shouldn't be. What? Emma, I've been thinking about this for days. About the woman I married and the woman who helped steal from you. They're not the same person. Or maybe they are, and I just never saw it before. David, Riley made some bad choices, but she's not a bad person. Isn't she? Because a good person would have warned you. A good person would have told you what Sophie was planning. A good person wouldn't have let you plan her entire wedding while knowing that her in-laws were robbing you blind. I didn't know what to say to that. Emma, I want you to know that I'm filing for divorce. David, you don't have to do that because of me. I'm not doing it because of you. I'm doing it because I can't trust my wife anymore. If she could lie to you for months about something this serious, what else has she lied to me about? After he hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about the cascade of consequences that had followed from one moment of standing up for myself. Marcus was facing prison. Sophie was under house arrest. Riley was facing criminal charges. David was filing for divorce. An entire network of relationships was crumbling because I'd refused to accept being treated like garbage. And for the first time since this all started, I felt genuinely sad about it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings and media attention. The local news had picked up the story about Riley's arrest, and suddenly the narrative shifted from local business owners charged with fraud to elaborate conspiracy involving wedding betrayal and financial crimes. I started getting calls from reporters wanting to interview me, talk show producers interested in my story, even a literary agent who thought my experience would make a good book. I turned them all down. This wasn't entertainment. It was my life. But one call I did take came from an unexpected source. A detective with the Financial Crimes Unit. Ms. Peterson, we've been investigating similar fraud schemes in the area, and your case has provided some crucial leads. We think Marcus and Sophie may have been part of a larger operation. What do you mean? We've found evidence of at least 12 other victims of similar identity theft schemes. All of them involve people who were in close personal relationships with the perpetrators, family members, close friends, romantic partners. You think this was organized? We think Marcus and Sophie learned these techniques from someone else, someone who's been running identity theft schemes for years. It turned out that Sophie's ex-husband, the one whose medical bills had somehow been linked to my Social Security number, was the ringleader of a sophisticated fraud operation. He'd been training family members and friends to identify potential victims and exploit their trust for financial gain. Marcus and Sophie weren't just greedy opportunists. They were part of a criminal network. Ms. Peterson, we'd like you to consider working with us as we investigate the larger conspiracy. Your case is the most thoroughly documented, and your testimony could help us prosecute the entire operation. What would that involve? Potentially testifying in multiple trials, reviewing evidence, helping us understand the methods they use to gain your trust and exploit your relationship. I agreed immediately. If my experience could help protect other people from being victimized the way I was, it was worth the time and emotional energy. Over the next month, I learned more about the scope of the fraud network than I ever wanted to know. There were victims who'd lost their homes, elderly people who'd been swindled out of their retirement savings by their own grandchildren, young couples who'd been financially destroyed by friends they trusted. And in every case, the pattern was the same: build trust, create dependence, exploit generosity, and then disappear when the victim figured out what was happening. Except I hadn't let them disappear. The trial for Marcus began 6 months after his arrest. I testified for 3 days, walking the jury through the timeline of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. The defense tried to portray me as a vindictive ex-fiancé seeking revenge, but the evidence was overwhelming. Marcus was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Sophie, who had cooperated with the investigation and provided testimony against the larger network, received 3 years of house arrest and 5 years of probation. Riley was convicted of conspiracy and obstruction of justice. She received 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service. The entire criminal network was dismantled. Sophie's ex-husband and 6 other conspirators were sentenced to prison terms ranging from 5 to 15 years. During the sentencing hearing for Marcus, the judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I'd been dreading this moment for months, trying to figure out what I could possibly say that would capture the magnitude of what he'd done to my life. In the end, I kept it simple. Your Honor, the defendant didn't just steal my money. He stole my ability to trust. He stole my sense of safety in my own relationships. He stole years of my life that I'll never get back. But what he couldn't steal was my determination to fight back when I was wronged. And what he couldn't steal was my belief that actions have consequences. Today, those consequences have caught up with him. Marcus tried to catch my eye as they led him away in handcuffs, but I didn't look back. After the trial ended, I found myself faced with a question I hadn't expected. What now? The legal proceedings were over. The criminals were being punished. The stolen money was being recovered through asset forfeiture and restitution orders. But I was still alone. I'd lost my best friend, my fiancé, and my trust in my own judgment about people. For a while, I considered staying in that space, staying angry, staying closed off, building walls so high that nobody could ever hurt me again. But then I remembered something my sister had said during one of our phone calls. Emma, don't let them steal your future along with your past. So I made a choice that surprised everyone, including myself. I decided to help other people who'd been where I was. I started volunteering with a nonprofit organization that helps victims of financial fraud navigate the legal system and rebuild their credit. I spoke at workshops about recognizing the warning signs of identity theft. I shared my story at conferences for law enforcement officers investigating financial crimes. And slowly, something unexpected happened. Helping other people heal helped me heal too. 6 months after Marcus's sentencing, I was giving a presentation at a community center about protecting yourself from fraud when a woman approached me afterward. Thank you, she said. tears in her eyes. My daughter has been stealing from me for 2 years, and I thought I was crazy for being upset about it. Your story made me realize that love doesn't mean letting people destroy you. What are you going to do? I'm going to call the police today. As I watched her walk away with purpose in her step, I realized that this was what justice really looked like. Not Marcus sitting in a prison cell, but this woman finding the courage to protect herself from someone who was supposed to love her. That night, I called my sister to tell her about the woman at the community center. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You turned the worst thing that ever happened to you into something that helps other people." I'm not sure if I'd call it the worst thing that ever happened to me anymore. What would you call it? The thing that taught me who I really am. And that was the truth. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been illuminating. It had shown me that I was stronger than I knew, braver than I believed, and more valuable than I'd ever given myself credit for. It had taught me that some people will always choose the easy path over the right one, but that didn't mean I had to. Most importantly, it had taught me that standing up for yourself isn't cruel or vindictive. It's necessary. The woman who had silently accepted being treated like a servant was gone. The woman who had made excuses for other people's bad behavior was gone. The woman who had believed that her value came from what she could provide to others was gone. In their place was someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to demand that others recognize it too. Someone who understood that love without respect isn't love at all. Someone who had learned that the most important person to be loyal to is yourself. What's the most important lesson you've learned about standing up for yourself? Comment below and let me know. And if this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe, because there are so many people out there who need to hear that they deserve better than what they're accepting.